It's the first time I've got to be in this building. Man, you all are blessed to have a facility like this, to have a school like Lake Hamilton to go to. My niece and nephew, two nieces and nephew actually graduated from Lake Hamilton a few years ago, and I know they love being a wolf, and I know you all love being a wolf, and you've got this fantastic facility. But we're not going to talk about sports and athletics a whole lot today. We might work it in a little bit. How many of y'all have Coach Utley for your teacher? Wow. Now, how many of you say he's doing a good job? Oh, yeah, everybody. So you may not believe this, but Coach Utley was actually my coach a long time ago. Back when he first got out of college and was coaching over at Fountain Lake, I was a student there. We're not too much difference in age, but at the time he had just got out of college. Coach Clay was the head coach. That was way before he came over here to Lake Hamilton. And Tommy Gillerin, who's the coach now, he used to be over at Fountain Lake. Tommy and I used to actually go to church together, but I know he got a chance to come back home and coach where he grew up and went to school. But, we learn a lot from our coaches. We learn a lot from our teachers, a lot of things that benefit you in the future and down the road. One thing I'll never forget that Coach Utley used to tell us is he would say, if your heart's not in it, get your rear end out of it. So that's pretty profound words. And if you've ever participated on an athletic team, that you really have to have your heart into what you're doing. And if you don't, you're not going to do the job that you need to do. That applies to a lot of things throughout life, whether it's academics, whether it's athletics, whether it's a career that you'll go into someday. But remember that. Put your heart into what you do. If it's worth doing, do it right. As I was admiring this facility, somebody said, we're going to do this right. We're not going to halfway do it. And what a fantastic job they've done here. There's a lot of things about Lake Hamilton that's fantastic. I was just in the White House a couple of weeks ago talking about the school safety program that you have here. So I can tell you unequivocally that Lake Hamilton School District's been discussed inside the White House, and I'm telling them they need to get Mr. Anderson up there to help educate the rest of the country on how you do school security and how you do it right, how you work with the community. And that ties in a lot to civics. It ties into what you're studying. Ties into how laws are made. We have this great country that's made up of states. And the states are what formed the federal government. It's not the other way around. Remember, we started off with the 13 colonies. Those colonies got upset with the way that Britain was ruling them, and they wrote this famous document. Who knows what that document's called? Yeah, the Declaration of Independence. And it said that we hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal. That they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, and among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. That was revolutionary. That a group of people came together and told King George, basically, stick it in your ear, King George. We don't want you ruling us anymore. We know that all people are created equal, that all people are endowed by their Creator with these rights of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. I've got a chance to travel all over the world and see a lot of neat places, from palaces and rulers and kings, and even to refugee camps. If you've never felt grateful for what you have, I wish that every American, not just every American kid, but every American could spend just a little bit of time in a refugee camp. I went to one in Syria, in Jordan, right on the Syrian border. These people are fleeing from Syria, going to this refugee camp where their own government's actually killing them. I met a young man in a wheelchair who had been shot in the back, and he was shot in the back by the troops from his own government when he was out working in the field. As I talked to people in that refugee camp, and there were 80,000 people in this camp out in the middle of the desert. It was 1 mile by 2 miles. There was very little plumbing in it and very little running water in it. And you're talking about almost as many people that live in Garland County
in this one little confined area in the middle of the desert. People that were grateful to have a little home that had some boards around it and tin on the top. You know, if you had tin on your roof instead of a tarp on your roof, and if you had a roof, you were living it up there in that Syrian refugee camp. But as I talked to those people, and especially this guy in the wheelchair, talking to him, what would you like to do? And what would you think he would say if I asked him what it is you want? Food? Yeah, food, clothing, and shelter, those are three needs that people nearly always have, but those needs were being met. A lot of people were saying that we should be taking more of these refugees in. So I wanted to know, I wanted to ask them, what is it you want? I expected someone to say, I want to go to America. People from all over the world want to come to America. You know, that's not what he said. He said, I want to go back to my village in Syria. I want to learn a new trade. I want to be able to work and provide for my family. And I want to do it without having to worry about somebody from my own government coming by and trying to kill me. You know what that guy said to me through that interpreter? He said he wanted life, he wanted liberty, and he wanted the pursuit of happiness. He wanted what our country is best known for, those very rights that our founders said weren't given to us by our government, weren't given to us through our Constitution. They were protected by our Constitution, but they were given to us by our Creator. That's what our founders said in the Declaration of Independence. When they wrote the Constitution, they said, we the people, in order to form a more perfect union, to establish justice, ensure domestic tranquility, and all those things, they were elaborating on what they said in the Declaration of Independence. As you're studying civics and history, we have a remarkable heritage and a remarkable past and history that we can draw on that's critical to our future. The reason we study history is so we don't make the same mistakes in the future. The reason you study civics is so you can become a productive, involved citizen in society. And you don't have to go to Congress to be involved in civics. You can be involved in volunteer work. You can be involved on the school board, in the city council, in the state legislature. But to be involved as a citizen. Civics is about being a citizen of this country. It's a great honor and a great privilege that we have. I'll never forget another thing. Back after I left high school, I went to the University of Arkansas, and I walked on and played football up there. And Coach Clay and Coach Utley had come out here, and they were in their early years of coaching at Lake Hamilton. And Coach Clay asked me to come out and speak to his team. So I was speaking to this group of young men. Coach Anderson was even an assistant coach at that time. And little did I know that a sophomore player that was in that crowd was a guy named Adam Brown. Little did I know that I was getting a chance to talk to somebody who is not only a local hero, but a national hero. And if you all haven't read the book Fearless, you have missed out. I think that should be required reading at Lake Hamilton High School for sure, is to read that book, Fearless. I've had members of Congress come up to me and say, aren't you from Hot Springs, Arkansas? I say, yeah. They said, have you heard about that book, Fearless? Do you know who Adam Brown is? I'm like, yeah, he graduated from high school across town from where I lived, coached by my same coaches, a great American hero. You know what? There may be the next Adam Brown sitting in this crowd today. There may be the next President of the United States, the next governor. You have all kinds of opportunities in this country, and that's the things that I hope you learn as you study civics. That's the things that I hope you aspire to and dream to have. Now, I've got to know a guy in Washington, D.C. who he's kind of a think tank guru. He's a guy that's got a doctorate degree in philosophy, and he studied music, so he's kind of this big thinker, but he's written a lot of books. His name's Arthur Brooks. You can Google him. You can look at his the works that he's done. But one thing that he studies is happiness. He's just fascinated with this idea of happiness and joy. And I've gotten to know Arthur and be in some small group settings with him, read some of his stuff. And who doesn't want to be happy? Is anybody in here that doesn't want to be happy? You don't want to be happy? Most people want to be happy. Even if they don't want to admit it, most everybody in life wants to be happy. And I can tell you, we live in a world today that's full of unhappy people. In the business I'm in, I get to meet a disproportionate share of unhappy people. There's people always ready to tell me where I'm doing wrong and what I need to do different and how life is miserable. But I know there's a lot of happy people out there as well. But Arthur Brooks has done an in-depth study of what makes people happy. And he's looked at large populations, he's looked at small populations, he's looked at different places around the world, he's looked at subcultures and different races and ethnicity, and he's divided it up. He's looked at it every way that he can, and he says consistently there are 4 things that people who are happy have in their lives. And he said even people measure happiness with different metrics or different ways that they measure it. But he says no matter where you go and what group you look at, there's 4 things that make people happy. Number 1 is faith. Number 2 is family. Number 3 is community. And the 4th one is work. He said no matter where you go in the world, where you go in this country, no matter what demographic you look at, you'll find those things are consistent with happy people. We all, I think, have something to be happy about because we're Americans, because we live in this great country, because we live in this great state. I think we live in the best part of the state, and you all live here in Piercy and around Lake Hamilton, where you've got these fantastic teachers, fantastic facilities, and lots of opportunities in life. Part of Civics is giving back what you've been blessed with. You've got the opportunity to help other people to learn how to be happy. There's been a lot about violence and school shootings and massacres in places like Las Vegas, people going into churches. These can't be happy people that are doing this. We've got tremendous opportunities here to experience the things that Arthur Brooks says the research shows will give you happiness. Faith. Do you have a house of worship? Do you have a place that you go? Do you have friends that you participate in faith-based activities with? I know even in schools they have organizations like the Fellowship of Christian Athletes. I know Coach Gillern is a huge supporter of that. Family. Families have taken it on the chin lately. If I were to ask you how many of you are from a home with broken families, over half of you would raise your hands. Communities. You've got a great community here. We live in a fantastic community. But when people quit caring about civics and quit caring about giving back to their community and don't care about being involved, you see communities deteriorate. And work. As much as we sometimes dread work and people talk bad about work, Arthur Brooks says that when you survey broad populations about how much they like their job, that like 90% of the people say they like their job, that 90% of the people are happy in what they're doing. Others may be looking for jobs, but people really find satisfaction in work. You're in a stage in your life where you're preparing yourself for your careers and for work. You've got unbelievable opportunities here. My nephew, who went to school here and he went out to National Park College, he learned some trades there, and he went up to Arkansas State, got his degree, and he's designing bass boats for express boats now. I'm kind of jealous of him getting to do that. There are all kinds of career opportunities, whether you go to college or not. There's actually more jobs available to you right now and better paying jobs, probably for going to a 2-year school and getting career and technical education than actually going to college and getting a 4-year degree. I was down in El Dorado yesterday in an economic development meeting, and a gentleman there said that a company called El Dorado Chemical, they were trying to hire an electrician, somebody to do computer controlling and electrical work in their factory. It took them a long time to find somebody, but their pay was $38 an hour with plus benefits. $38 an hour working 2,000 hours a year, that's $76,000 for a job that you could get by going to a trade school and learning how to do programming and electrical work. There's a huge demand for that out there. There's also something that I don't want to ever fail to talk about when I'm talking to young people. It's a crisis in our country that's bigger now than it's ever been. And when I go around and talk to employers around the state and in my district, I say, how's business? They say, oh, business is great. I said, we would like to add another shift onto our facility. We would like to expand production. We would like to add new equipment and new processes. I said, but we can't find people to work. I say, what? What do you mean you can't find people to work? You mean you can't find trained people who are welders and electricians and mechanics? And they just kind of laugh and say, no, we can't find people that can pass a drug test and will show up to work on time. That's how desperate employers are to find good people right now. I know you hear it beaten into your heads all the time, but drugs and alcohol will take you places that you don't want to go, and it will do things in your life that makes your life miserable, that makes your family miserable, that makes your community miserable, and quite frankly does a huge disservice to our country and the blessings that we have that men like Adam Brown and others have fought and died for so that we can have those freedoms. It's a serious problem. I'm the chairman of a subcommittee on the Natural Resources Committee, a subcommittee on oversight and investigations, and I made a trip down to the border just a few weeks ago. I was going around with the Border Patrol, and as bad as I think the drug problem is here, it seems like every day I learn something that makes me realize it's even worse. There's a drug called fentanyl. You ever heard of fentanyl? It's a terrible drug when it's used wrong. It's used in operating rooms sometimes. It's a very, very potent painkiller. It's a synthetic drug. Well, the drug cartels have determined or figured out they can sprinkle fentanyl on heroin and it makes it more addictive. The medical professionals tell us that 2 milligrams of fentanyl will kill somebody. In 3 months, the Border Patrol confiscated 192 pounds of fentanyl. So I studied engineering in college. I can do the math and the conversion. That's enough fentanyl to kill 43 million people. That's what they confiscated coming over the border illegally. The only reason that's coming across the border is because there's a market for it here in this country. Somebody's got to do something about it. There's billions of federal dollars being spent trying to stop that. But it's going to be up to you and your generation and our generation working together if we ever want to stop it, because it's destroying the greatest country ever known to man. And it's a much more major problem than you can ever imagine. There's this economic theory called the tragedy of the commons. And it's based on, if you think of a fishery, how many of y'all like to fish? I like to fish. If I get any spare time, I like to be on Lake Ouachita fishing. We have these fishing regulations where you can't keep too many fish. You got to throw some of them back. And this economic theory came from fishing out in the ocean, that the individual actor thinks that his actions doesn't make a difference. That I'm going to keep a few more fish than I'm supposed to. I'm going to break the rules, and it won't make any difference in the big picture. But what happens when everybody's keeping a few more fish than they're supposed to? What happens when everybody's breaking the rules and stretching the rules more than they should? You end up where there's no fish left for anyone. And we're in a point in history in our country where all of us are going to have to make up our mind to do what's right, to follow the rules, to not think that our actions don't matter, because your actions matter. They matter in your life personally, they matter to people around you, and they matter a lot more to the community and the country as a whole. I could talk to you a lot about the three branches of government. What are the three branches of government? We'll see if you've been learning it right here.
Oh, yeah, I need this, don't I? It's the legislative, judicial, and executive.
Good job. What's your name?
My name's Logan, and I'm cool.
Logan, and
I'm Logan, and I'm cool.
You got the right answer, Logan. Everybody give Logan a hand. Legislative, judicial, and executive branch. Does anybody want to volunteer for the next question before they hear it? That's why you got to volunteer. Logan got it too easy. All right.
I know what the question is first. I don't trust this. Korean.
Okay, I'm a member of the House of Representatives. What branch of government do I serve in?
Pass. Executive.
You want to dial a friend? Use a lifeline? All right, what's your friend's name?
My name's Andy. Andy.
What branch of government do I serve in as a member of the House of Representatives? You got a 1 in 3 chance. That's Trump.
My bad.
I'm not a judge.
What's he? Oh, legislative.
Legislative. Give Andy a hand. What branch of government does President Trump serve in? Executive. Judge Neil Gorsuch, which branch of government does he serve in? Supreme Court, the judicial branch. 3 co-equal branches of government. I'm in Congress. We have a bicameral Congress. If you go to places like Britain, if you go to Israel, they have a parliament where it's just one house. From that parliament, they elect their leader, called the prime minister. We're not like that. We have a Congress that makes the laws. It's composed of the House and the Senate. How many House members are there in the United States? All right, we've got that. You got it right. What's your name?
That is right, bro. It's right. 435. Kylie.
Kylie got it right. 435. Yeah. How many U.S. senators are there? Up here in the back. How many? I think he said 100. Give him a hand. Every state gets 2, so we're going to do math. How many states are there? 50. All right. Y'all seem to know, you all seem to know your civics pretty well. I think Coach Utley's done a good job, so let's give Coach Utley a hand. So for the remainder of our time, I want to turn it around and let you all ask me questions. So it's fair game. You can ask me about what it's like being a congressman or anything you want to know about what I do. And we got the first volunteer on the front row. What's your name?
My name is Kanan. I would like to know your thoughts on gun control.
All right, this is Kanan. He wants to know my thoughts on gun control. Here are my thoughts on gun control. So I talked about the Declaration of Independence. That's where we told Great Britain, we told the King George, stick it in your ear. We're not going to be subject to anymore. That caused a revolution. If you look at the end of that Declaration of Independence, those signers of that declaration said, we pledge our lives, our liberty, and our financial well-being to this cause. And many of them died. After the Revolutionary War, we wrote this thing called the Constitution. They were having the Constitutional Convention. The states couldn't come together on it, and they decided to put something else in the Constitution. It was called the Bill of Rights. The first 10 amendments to the Constitution. What was the first one? What's the first amendment? Speech, press, religion. Okay, y'all got that. The freedom to assemble. That was the first right given to us as Americans. Enshrined in our Constitution. What was the second thing our founders? The Second Amendment to the Constitution. You have the right to keep and bear arms, and our founders put something very unique right on the end of that. They said, "This shall not be infringed." They put a special message on it. You can't mess with this. Now, did they pass the Second Amendment so that you could have a gun to go hunting with? No, it wasn't about hunting. Was it about target practice? No, it was about having a well-armed militia, having everybody in the country armed so that other countries knew they couldn't mess with us. Now, are there things we need to do to make sure that the wrong people don't get weapons? There are, and we've got rules in place for that. What happened in Florida was not because there wasn't a law there to keep that kid from doing what he did. It wasn't because the authorities weren't notified. It was because somebody that was very unhappy in life decided to go in and take the innocent lives of people that should have been his friends. We've got mental health issues in our country. But to answer your question about gun control, we can't regulate away this problem, I don't believe. I think what Lake Hamilton's done, and they're actually a leader in the country. 25 years ago, before we had this first school shooting called Columbine, before we had the Jonesboro West Side school shooting, somebody at Lake Hamilton was a visionary and said, we want to protect our students. We want to put a safety program in place so that if something happens, we can react to it immediately. When you look at the statistics on an active shooter, there's a victim every 10 seconds. You can't wait for the Garland County Sheriffs, you can't wait for the state police to get here, but because Mr. Anderson and others who are leaders here at your school, some employees that you don't know about and nobody else knows about, they're trained as commissioned security officers to protect you if something like that, God forbid, was ever to happen. That's why I think we need to do more programs like that across the country. I think that's why the White House was interested in talking to me about what's happening here at Lake Hamilton. And I think you all can be very proud of that. I know there's been surveys done that show the community supports your security program here. And I'm glad to be able to represent you and to carry that message back to Washington, D.C. I've been wearing the front row out. You got to. Right.
My name's Payne. Have you met Obama as well as Trump?
The question is, have I met President Obama? Yes, I met President Obama. He was president when I was first elected to Congress. I can tell you, I didn't get many invitations. I got 0 invitations to the White House when President Obama was president, but I've been to the White House a lot since President Trump's been president. A neat thing about this job is you get to meet a lot of interesting people. I've got to meet Benjamin Netanyahu, the Prime Minister of Israel, many times, President El-Sisi of Egypt, King Assad of Jordan, and got to meet the Pope, got to meet really cool people by getting to serve in Congress. But you know what? There's not a one of them that are any more important than you are or any more important than I am. My dad used to have a saying that, everybody puts their pants on one leg at a time. Don't let anybody tell you that you're not good enough to be anything you want to be, because you've got more opportunities to do what you want to do in this country than any place else in the world. And I encourage you to take advantage of those opportunities. We got a question up here. Yeah, if you commit a felony, you get your rights taken away from you. You know, the whole purpose of government is to restrict rights. So the less government is involved, the more rights the individual has. The more government gets involved, the more regulations, the more laws that are put in place, the more of your rights that are taken away. Some people, they're called libertarians, think that there should be no rules or restrictions or regulations. Everybody should kind of be their own person and get to do what they want to do when they want to do it. How many of you are glad that we have divider lines drawn on the highway? Divider lines drawn on the highway. How many of you are glad that when the light is red, you're supposed to stop? Yeah, you know, those are government regulations. But not many people will complain that there are government regulations to make traffic safer and to make our lives safer. So there's a point where you've got to regulate. There's a point where when you commit a felony, you give up your rights as a citizen. The mental health issue is another, I would say, crisis that we've got in our country today. I know that there are mental health issues that schools have to deal with that are greater than they've ever been before. I know schools struggle with funding. They need more people to help deal with those issues. The guy that was in the Air Force that went into the church in Texas, he had mental health issues. He was supposed to have been on the list that the Air Force dropped the ball in putting him on the list, or he wouldn't have been able to buy those weapons that he did. So you can't paint with a broad brush, but if you commit a felon, you've lost your rights, and you don't have the same rights as other citizens do when you're a felon. And you know, drug crimes can cause you to be a felon as well. So we talked about that a little earlier. Next question. The front row is active.
Okay, so there are some felons that committed crimes that weren't even violent and didn't have anything to do with hurting anybody. So why did they not have rights whenever they didn't do anything physically to harm somebody?
Hey, the question, if y'all didn't hear that, there are some people who are felons who commit crimes that didn't hurt anybody. We're also a nation of laws. Now, that doesn't mean that some laws don't need to be changed, but the laws are on the books that if you do this, if you cross this line, you've committed a felony. And there's also a saying that ignorance of the law is no excuse for breaking the law. I'm actually working on a bill in Congress that would be modeled after a bill here in Arkansas, that if you're a juvenile and you commit a felony, that you can't be sentenced to life in prison without parole. There's laws like that need to be changed. We need to be, especially, what's that? They can charge you as an adult under current laws. But I'm working on a change in the law that would, if you are a juvenile and you commit a felony, that could carry a life sentence, that you can't be sentenced to life. We have some sentencing issues with drugs that probably aren't where they need to be. We have drug courts that have worked great to help people get off of drugs. I assume when you're talking about nonviolent offenders, that's typically drugs. But we also have people who are very violent, who have done horrible things, who need to be left in prison for the rest of their lives. Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Coach Etley explained this morning about the new bill that was recently passed. Could you explain it more, please?
You're talking about the bill last week? The omnibus? Okay. Never thought you would ask. You're gonna get a real kind of deep in the weeds civics lesson here. What was your name? Maggie? Maggie asked a question about the spending bill. Oh, did I say it wrong? Maddie with a D. I'm sorry. So I'm getting old and I can't hear as well anymore. Maddie wanted to know about the omnibus spending bill last week. So You're going to have to listen carefully if you really want to understand about this. For the funding of our government, the Constitution mandates Congress to fund our government. That same Constitution that protects our rights, it tells us as Congress, your job is to fund the government. The way we fund the government is we pass a budget. I'm on the budget committee. The budget sets the limits for expenditures, and it sets the ceiling for expenditures, the floor for revenue. The budget gives instructions to the rest of Congress that when you do appropriations with that spending, you can't spend more than the level in the budget. When you do taxes, it's got to be above the floor level set in the budget. All the policy that you have to do has to fit in the framework of that budget. The fiscal year or the financial year of our country runs from October 1st to September 30th. So every year a new budget and new appropriation bills have to be passed. We know without a shadow of a doubt on September 30th of 2018, the funding runs out for the federal government. What Congress should be doing right now, what we did last year in the House, is we passed a budget and we passed 12 appropriation bills. That's the job for the House. Those bills start in the House. We sent them over to the Senate, and the Senate knew that funding was going to run out on September 30th, and they never took up a single one of those bills. You might ask, why would the Senate not take up one of those bills if the Constitution mandates to Congress that you have to fund the government, and the only way to, or the proper way to fund the government is through the appropriations process? Well, the Senate has a system called cloture. It's called the filibuster. You might hear it referred to as the 60-vote rule. And you can't bring up a bill and vote on it in the Senate without getting 60 votes in the Senate. Right now, Republicans have 51 seats in the Senate and Democrats have 49 seats. So to bring up any bill in the Senate, assuming you get all the Republicans 51, you've got to have at least 9 Democrats to come on board to bring that bill up in the Senate. The Senate has refused to bring up bills to debate them. So the funding deadline passed, and we passed something in Congress called the continuing resolution to fund the government for a few months till we could come back and address this again. And then we did another continuing resolution. And here we are at the end of March, and the funding for 2017 had never been passed. So the Senate Democrats finally said, okay, we'll let you bring this bill up for a vote, but in order to do that, you've got to put all this stuff on it. And it wasn't stuff that was in appropriation bills that were passed in the House. It was things that they wanted for their state or for their particular interest. And we ended up with a bill that totaled $1.3 trillion. That's a lot of money. $1 trillion of that is money that we don't have. So it's called the deficit. With that bill passing, the deficit's going to go up $1 trillion. Have y'all learned about interest before? Interest, like if you put your money in an investment, it earns so much interest. Well, our total debt in the country is $21 trillion right now. If interest rates go up 1%, that's $210 billion of interest. So I'll ask you another civics question. How do you pay for things in the government? What pays for government spending? Taxes. That's easy. Taxes come in and then expenditures get made. Is there any way to pay for a government expense other than taxes? So if we accumulate debt, what will pay for that debt? Taxes. If we don't have the money now, when will those taxes be collected that pays for that debt? When you all have jobs. And it's so bad it's not just when you all have jobs, it's when your kids and grandkids have jobs. So what's happened in Congress now is we've said we will take on more debt right now and we'll pay for it later. So the generation before me and my generation has done a great disservice to you and future generations in loading you up with debt that can only be paid for with taxes that you'll pay in the future. There was some good stuff in that bill, some things I strongly supported, but I voted against it because I didn't want to put more debt on you and your kids and grandkids than you already have. We have people in the Pentagon that have said the national debt is more of a threat to our country than foreign countries, foreign militaries. The amount of interest on the debt, if interest rates go up 3 or 4%, will be more than all of that spending, more than $1.3 trillion a year, which was used to fund the military, the VA, all the national parks, the Forest Service, roads and transportation. Just the interest on the debt will be more than that. So that's a complicated subject about that omnibus bill, but that's how it came about. President Trump said he won't sign another one, but the Senate's already saying they're not going to hear appropriation bills for next year either. Yes, sir. Okay, 2,000 page. It was a 2,000 page, I think 2,232 pages in that omnibus. Are any of y'all speed readers? Anybody a speed reader? I've got a friend in Congress who's actually taking classes on speed reading. He's a member of Congress from Alabama. He could not read that bill from the time we got it till time to vote on it. I read it until about 2 in the morning, till I couldn't focus on the pages anymore. And I said, that's good enough for me to know to vote against it if I can't even read through it one time, much less comprehend what's in it. So there was money for the military in it. There was money for the opioid epidemic. There was money for everything that funds the federal government, from the Department of Agriculture to the Department of Interior, to transportation and infrastructure funding. But there's things that we still don't know that were in that bill. To been able to read that bill between the time we got it and the time to vote on it, you'd have to be able to read 132 pages per hour nonstop. And I know a bona fide speed reader that couldn't do it. So the verdict's still out on everything that was in it. If you've seen a printed copy of it, it's literally that tall. No, that's all. That's 2,232 pages of it. Do we have any questions up? Yes, ma'am. What was that? Do I support medical marijuana? I voted against medical marijuana when it was on the ballot in Arkansas. Marijuana is still a controlled substance, and it's against federal law to use marijuana, even though some states have legalized it. The problem I was telling you about with employers finding people that can pass a drug test, whether it's prescribed medically or not, you're not going to get hired to operate equipment that's going to injure yourself or injure somebody around you, or to do a job where you can hurt somebody else if you're impaired. When I got elected to Congress, I held up my right hand and I took an oath to defend the Constitution of the United States against all enemies, foreign and domestic. The federal government, the law in the federal government right now is that marijuana is a controlled substance. It's illegal, and I do not support marijuana. If there are some medical benefits to it, you can extract that and put it in a pill and prescribe it through a pharmacy. But that's not what people want. They want what California's got, what Colorado's got, medical marijuana. The camel gets his nose under the tent. The next thing you've got is recreational marijuana. Got time for maybe 1 or 2 more questions. Yes, ma'am. The question is, am I a liberal or a conservative? I'm going to let y'all vote. How many of you think I'm a liberal? How many of you think I'm a conservative? Conservatives win, yeah. One last question, right here behind the rail. I can't hear you.
What does liberal and conservative mean? Jasmine, no.
Her name's Jasmine.
All right. Jasmine wants to know what liberal and conservative means. Liberal and conservative has kind of taken on new meanings over time. A conservative typically means that you adhere to long-standing values, that you think the Constitution is a document that's not a living document that needs to be changed, that it was put in place by our founders, that they knew what they were doing, and that's what's best for our country. Liberal in the classic sense is a good thing. You hear of liberal arts education, but liberal has taken on the meaning that of like progressivism, and whether you consider yourself liberal or conservative, what we've got to remember more than anything is that we are Americans, and liberals and conservatives can work together for the best solutions to create policy and government that benefits the most people. And that's what, people complain about Republicans and Democrats, and they're going at it head to head all the time. But that really is where those conservative and liberal ideas come together, and we have debates, and we determine what's going to rule for our society. So I'm a Republican, I'm a conservative, I'm proud of that, but if you're a liberal and you hold to those ideas, I'm going to pray for you. No, that's what makes our country great. None of us are perfect, none of us have all the right ideas, but if we'll work together, we can make the whole place better for everyone. What was that? Who did I vote for? I voted for President Trump. Yep. Are any of y'all old enough to vote? No. How many of you would have voted for President Trump? I can't vote. All right. Well, thank you again for letting me be here today and spend some of this time with you. I hope that you will get involved. I hope you will not sit back on the sidelines. I hope you will do what Coach Utley told me to do when I was your age. He said, put your heart into it. If it's worth doing, it's worth doing right. You have tremendous opportunities. You have a great heritage here at Lake Hamilton. You have a great heritage as Americans. And it's up to you to carry the torch and to make our country even better in the future. And I've got faith in you, because if it's not you, who else is it going to be? If y'all ever need anything from the federal government, feel free to contact my office. If you've got input, if your parents or grandparents or anybody you know needs something, you'd say, go down there and talk to Congressman Westerman's office. It's down on Bathhouse Row. And if you ever come to Washington, D.C., let us know that too, because we can get you some special tours and show you some things that you otherwise may not see. With that, I'm going to relinquish the microphone and say thank you one more time.